My parents sent me to live with my uncle in the countryside to get rid of the useless twin, but years later, they got offended when I introduced them to my new family. 10 years ago, when I was 12, my parents sent me to live with my uncle, my dad's older brother, in the countryside because they didn't want to take care of me anymore. They thought I was a burden and preferred to raise only my twin sister, whom they believed to be much more capable than me. I don't deny it, she was much smarter than me, and unfortunately, I couldn't keep up with her. I was mostly average, but in a family of gifted individuals, being average is not enough. Both my parents were doctors and had decided that my sister and I would also become doctors, just like them. But honestly, I never had much interest in academics and leaned more towards creative activities. That was what I really wanted to do with my life. They used to put me under tremendous pressure, and I didn't do well in school. It didn't help that my parents didn't even try to encourage me to improve. They just insulted me and constantly compared me to my twin sister. I was used to that kind of treatment from a young age, but over time, it only got worse, and I found it very difficult to concentrate on anything. When I was 12 and started high school, I was doing so poorly in everything that I was failing most of my classes. Even though I tried my best, I couldn't get better grades. My teachers constantly complained about me because they didn't know how things were at home. They just thought I was lazy and unwilling to put in enough effort to improve. Even the people at school compared me to my brilliant twin sister, who was doing much better than me. I literally cried every night before going to sleep because every day, my parents made sure to remind my sister how much they loved her and remind me how much I disappointed them and needed to improve. One night, things got so bad that, during dinner, they insulted me once again because of my grades. I lost control and lashed out at them, and they punished me for the next 2 weeks. So, I decided to run away from home, not even knowing where I would go. Obviously, I didn't get very far and only made it to the nearby park, where I sat alone, sad and terrified in the dark. They found me there around 5 in the morning. They had to call the police to find me. After bringing me back home, that was the day they decided to send me to my uncle's house in the countryside, where I could grow up with him and his family. When my parents told me they were sending me to live with my uncle and his family, I literally begged them many times not to do it, promising to improve and never disappoint them again or try to run away. But they didn't care about any of that. They told me I had let them down and they couldn't deal with it anymore. They had another daughter to take care of, and they couldn't spend all their time caring for someone who had proven to be useless time and time again. I don't even think that was true. They spent most of their time doting on my sister. They barely cared about me unless it was to mock me for how poorly I was doing in school. Anyway, I kept begging them not to do it because I didn't want to be away from them. And most of all, I didn't want to be separated from my sister, as she was literally the only person who treated me well in that family. However, they didn't listen to me and did what they had to do. They made me say goodbye to my sister and didn't even allow her to be with me on the trip to my uncle's house. Once there, I literally couldn't stop crying for the next few weeks and just wanted to go back home. I kept trying to call my parents. My uncle and aunt were very kind and understanding during that time because they could understand what I was going through, but my parents didn't answer my calls and ignored me. A few weeks later, I decided to accept my fate and make peace with it. I kept in touch with my sister. She was the only person who talked to me, but it had to be in secret because I didn't have a cell phone. So, I had to call her from my uncle's home phone when my parents weren't around. Social media was just starting to become popular at that time, and fortunately, she used the computer to talk to me. Occasionally, when she told me the coast was clear, I would call her, and we could finally talk. My sister and I have kept in touch. We love each other, and it will always be that way. She has kept me updated on what has been going on with her and our parents over the past 10 years. And she also told me that our parents were planning to contact me a few weeks ago, which allowed me to mentally prepare for that. For the past 10 years, I have had absolutely no contact with my parents. Initially, because they refused to contact me or even talk to me after leaving me at my uncle's house. After spending a couple of years at my uncle's house, I was the one who simply wasn't interested in getting back in touch with them. They had abandoned me, and that was the end of the story. Honestly, after moving in with my uncle and aunt, I was living a much better life. They didn't put me under the kind of pressure my parents did, and I started doing better in school. I was still average academically, not the straight-A student my sister had always been, but at least I wasn't failing all my classes. My uncle and aunt also allowed me to participate in other activities like school plays and sports, which my parents wouldn't let me do because they thought it would negatively affect my grades. I was living my life to the fullest and was very happy with them. When I lived with my parents, they also forbade me from talking to boys because they thought it would distract me. However, my uncle and aunt didn't have those ridiculous restrictions and allowed me to talk to whoever I wanted. I could also bring friends home. Incidentally, that was how I met my husband, who has been with me all this time. We have been together for the past 6 years. We met in high school and have been inseparable ever since, even attending the same university. I graduated from college last year, and a week after we graduated together, we got married in an intimate ceremony. Last month I gave birth to our child. I no longer live with my uncle and aunt. My husband and I have a house a few streets away from them, but we visit them frequently, and they also visit us to see our child. I'm currently on maternity leave, so I don't have to return to work for a few more weeks. My sister has been openly in contact with me over the past few years because after she turned 18, she decided she didn't feel the need to hide our bond from our parents. There was nothing they could do about it. She was the maid of honor at my wedding and is also my child's godmother. Last week, while visiting us, she told me that our parents were planning to visit me. They still didn't know that I was married and had a baby because practically everyone stopped talking to them after they abandoned me. It was such a cruel thing to do. So, they didn't know anything about my life, and my sister didn't think it was necessary to tell them about me, so she didn't mention anything, even when they asked. But after 10 years, they were finally feeling some kind of remorse for what they did so many years ago and planned to get in touch with me. She thought it was her duty to let me know so I could decide what I wanted to do and wouldn't be surprised when they contacted me asking if they could visit. A couple of days after my sister's visit, my parents did indeed contact me through social media, asking if they could visit me. They didn't apologize for anything. It was just a simple message with both of them asking if they could visit, nothing more. I felt a bit disappointed by that message because I really expected them to at least say they were sorry for how they had treated me in the past. So, for a while, I was so upset that I thought about not responding to that message at all. But then I had a better idea. I thought I would invite them to my house and show them my current life because I now had a great life. I thought it would be a fitting idea to let them know how well I was doing without them. So, I gave them my address and invited them to dinner over the weekend. I also invited my uncle, aunt, and sister, and of course, my husband and child would be there because the dinner would be at my house. I didn't tell my uncle and aunt that my parents would be there, so everyone was quite surprised when they arrived at my house last weekend. This was 3 days ago, and I still don't know if I did the right thing or not. Anyway, once everyone was there, things were quite awkward because obviously I hadn't seen my parents in 10 years, and everyone in the family had cut them off. That included my uncle and aunt, as they also didn't want to have anything to do with my parents. The reason behind this was that my parents had promised not only to support me financially while I lived with my uncle, but also to stay in touch so that I wouldn't feel alone and to ensure that my emotional needs were met. But they only fulfilled half of that promise. They sent money every month, but didn't bother to stay in touch with me and were happy to be rid of me. That wasn't the deal my uncle had agreed to, and he was upset because my parents were abandoning me emotionally. However, he didn't mind taking care of me, so he was the one who stood up for me and told the rest of the family what my dad was doing. Everyone else cut my father off for that reason, which caused a lot of animosity between the two. But my dad continued to send money until I turned 18. After that, there was no contact between them either. After greeting each other, we were supposed to have dinner together. I decided to make a toast before that. As if things weren't awkward enough, I decided to lean into it and make it even worse because I wanted my parents to feel regret and feel bad. So, I stood up and started giving a speech about how wonderful the last 10 years of my life had been compared to the first 12. I made it seem like a speech for my uncle and aunt because, honestly, they had done so much for me over the last decade, and I don't think I could have come this far in life without them. I also thanked my husband for being with me all the time and my sister for never giving up on me despite everything that was going on. Very intentionally, I decided to snub my parents in my speech because I had nothing to thank them for. They noticed because during my entire speech, they kept their heads down and didn't say a word. Once I finished my speech, I decided to rub it in even more and turned to my parents, telling them that I was finally ready to introduce them to my new family. They were completely taken aback when I announced that because I don't think they expected me to say something like that. As soon as I said this was my new family, my mother burst into tears and literally ran out. After they left, we had a very awkward and silent dinner. No one stayed for dessert, and I was glad because it was a very heavy situation. I didn't like my parents, but I don't think what I did was right. I haven't had the chance to talk to my uncle and aunt yet, but my sister and husband both think I went a bit too far and that I shouldn't have even responded to my parents' messages if I didn't want to interact with them. But insulting them like that was simply unnecessary. Am I the bad one for inviting my parents to dinner and then humiliating them? Update 1. Well, so far the comments have been pretty divided on whether I should apologize to my parents or not, but everyone agrees that I should at least talk to my uncle and aunt. Since there's still no consensus about my parents, I decided to contact my uncle today. It's been a week since the family dinner I hosted, and we hadn't been able to talk much in the last few days because I was very busy, and they were too. I also think the awkwardness was still there, so we didn't talk to each other because we didn't want to make things more uncomfortable. Today, I brought up the subject by calling my uncle, and before he could say anything, I told him I was very sorry for inviting my parents to dinner that day without even giving them a heads up. He said he was a little surprised that I did that, but eventually he got over it. He just hadn't contacted me because he didn't know if I was okay after that night, as I was quite upset. He agreed that things had gotten quite awkward that day, but he told me it was all water under the bridge and didn't matter anymore. Then I called my aunt and apologized to her as well, and she had a similar reaction. So now that I've apologized to both of them and that's out of the way, I don't feel as guilty anymore. Personally, I don't feel like I owe my parents an apology. After everything they put me through in my childhood, I really don't think anyone would feel bad for behaving the way I did. They still haven't apologized to me, so I don't see a reason to do so. I talked to my husband about this too, as he had said I should apologize to them, and I explained that while what I did at dinner was unjustified, the way they treated me in the past wasn't acceptable either. He seemed to understand where I was coming from, so he didn't push the matter further. I told my sister the same, and she was a bit skeptical about it, but then she told me that at the end of the day, it was my decision. I was the one who had been wronged, so whatever I decided to do would be fair. She hasn't been able to get in touch with our parents over the past week either, as they've been suspiciously quiet. But I guess they're just staying out of the way for now. They will definitely contact me again and demand an apology or try to create some drama. Update 2. Hi, I just wanted to clarify something. My sister is not trying to be diplomatic by having a good relationship with our parents, and even if she is, I'm fine with that. It doesn't need to become such a big issue in the comments section, which I've been noticing. She knows what they did to me was very wrong, but she was also very young. It wasn't like she could have stood up and protested for me. She was against the idea at the time, but we were so little that our opinions really didn't matter, so she couldn't have done anything either. She did her best and kept in touch with me, so that's enough. The reason she stays in touch with our parents is because they are aging, and she doesn't want to abandon them because that would make her feel guilty. There's nothing more to it. It's not really that deep, so please don't accuse her of anything. It's completely unnecessary. We have a lot of love between us, so we don't believe the comments being made about her are justified. Now, moving on to what happened, as I mentioned in my last update towards the end, I was quite sure that my parents were not going to stay quiet and kindly accept what I had done. They simply aren't the type of people to let things go easily, so I had been prepared for some kind of retaliation from their side. Finally, it happened today, 10 days after the dinner I organized. They decided to make the incident public and actually posted everything on social media. I thought that was quite surprising because they don't really have a very active social media presence, but just for this incident, they decided to post it. As I had expected, it was a very one-sided post where they only talked about how hurt they were, but didn't mention any of the things they had done in the past. Honestly, I wouldn't have cared about that post if it had been directed at our family members, as no one in my family likes my parents because of what they did in the past by abandoning me and other things. But they were very sneaky about the whole thing and decided to go ahead and tag my coworkers and my husband's coworkers too, even though he didn't have anything to do with this whole fiasco. Obviously, my coworkers weren't aware of my history with my parents or my strained relationship with them, so they were all quite shocked when they were tagged in that post and started blowing up my phone almost immediately. I'm on maternity leave, so obviously I didn't know what they had posted because I wasn't at work, and I really don't check my social media that often because I'm usually busy with my child. But after they started sending me messages telling me to check what had happened online, I was stunned. I didn't know how to react to it because I wasn't expecting any of this. I was quite sure that they had probably found my coworkers' accounts by stalking me online because I have quite a few photos with them and tagged them in them. So that's probably what they had been doing for the past week, stalking me, trying to figure out who I was friends with at work so they could ruin my reputation. Anyway, I saw that post and was stunned for a couple of minutes, but then I decided to comment and tell people the reality of the situation. I had nothing to hide. I was the victim in the situation, and what happened at the dinner was uncalled for, but not unfair. So I wrote down the entire incident that had taken place, how they left me at my uncle's house all those years ago, and then refused to keep in touch with me. Even when they had contacted me, they hadn't apologized. And after coming to my house, they still hadn't done so. If they had, I might have reconsidered saying the things I did. But anyway, in my opinion, what I did was not wrong. I also clarified the same to my friends at work who had been tagged in the post. I apologized to them on behalf of my parents because they didn't need or deserve to be dragged into our drama. And it was really ridiculous of my parents to do something like this. Obviously, I'm quite upset because they could have just targeted me and kept things clean, but dragging my coworkers into this is below the belt and unacceptable. I've been waiting for my husband to come home. I didn't want to bother him at work with this today because he told me he had an important meeting with a client. Otherwise, I might have contacted him and told him about this. But honestly, this is just petty drama, and I can handle this on my own. I already spoke with my sister, and she thinks our parents are acting crazy right now. They probably just couldn't tolerate the disrespect and completely lost their composure, and I think that's exactly what happened. But even then, nothing can justify this kind of behavior. I haven't even told my uncle and aunt about this because I'm sure they're going to have very strong reactions to this. And I don't want to bother them with this right now because they're quite busy with work. Update 3. It's been a couple of hours since I posted my last update. It's 8 in the evening right now and everyone is at my house, my uncle, aunt, and sister. My husband has also come back from work, and we're just trying to figure out a way to deal with this situation. I don't want to go to a lawyer, as many of you suggested. I really don't have the time or energy to file a petition and then deal with that. It's just not necessary. I want to handle this personally and keep lawyers out of this for as long as possible. Of course, if they refuse to take down that post, then I might have to get in touch with a lawyer and file a defamation suit or whatever they deem appropriate. But until then, we're going to do our best to get them to take it down. So far, everyone has texted them and asked them to take it down, but they haven't cared about any of that. They haven't even responded to our messages, so I don't know what they're thinking. They haven't bothered to delete my comment either, so at least everyone who sees that post will know the truth. And a significant number of people have seen that post. It's getting a lot of attention for some reason, which isn't good for me because I don't come off very well in that post. Not just my coworkers who were tagged saw that post, but some of my acquaintances also saw it and are asking me about it. I don't know how it showed up in their feed, probably because I was tagged in the post too. I've already removed that tag, but it's still showing up in people's feeds. I figured there must be some glitch with the app, but it's not good for me. People are asking me about it and I'm tired of answering their questions when they can just read my comment and be done with it. But for some reason, they feel the need to contact me personally and ask me about it over and over again. It's getting really annoying, and I just want this to end. Honestly, I'm just crossing my fingers that HR doesn't get involved because that could cause problems for me. I really don't want to ruin my reputation at work because of my parents. So, for now, my family and I are still trying to figure out a way to get them to take it down, but they aren't responding to us. Tomorrow, my sister told me she's going to visit our parents and ask them to remove it in person. That might work, and if they still refuse to do it, we'll have no choice but to go after them with a lawyer. I really hope it doesn't come to that because it will be a lot of work for me, and right now I just want to spend time with my child. That's what my maternity leave is for, not to deal with their stupid antics. Update 4. Hi. So my sister went to visit our parents today for about an hour. I had no idea what was going on, but half an hour ago she told me she had talked to our parents, and they were very upset, which is why they made that post and tagged my coworkers. My guess was correct. They had managed to find my coworkers and their social media accounts by following me on social media. That was pretty creepy on their part, but hey, that's literally the least of my worries right now. Anyway, she told me she had a long discussion with them and they said they would happily delete the post, but first, I had to apologize to them. I instantly told my sister that wasn't going to happen because I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm going to stand by that. Fortunately, she knew I wasn't going to apologize, so she told my parents that no matter what, I wasn't going to pretend to apologize for something I didn't even do wrong. They could save their time and energy and just delete the post, because otherwise, I was going to come after them with a lawyer, and that wouldn't be very good for them. That discussion lasted almost an hour, and in the end, they decided they were going to delete the post and be done with it. But they also told my sister to tell me that they were cutting me out of their lives and the inheritance as well. I really don't care about any of that. I just want that post gone. They can keep their inheritance, it doesn't matter to me. My husband and I are doing pretty well in our careers and know we're going to be fine. At least I don't have to depend on them for money, and my sister said she told them the same thing. So at least they know how I feel about that. Anyway, now that this is resolved, I'm going to spend the rest of my maternity leave with my child and make the most of it before I have to go back to work. Thank you so much for all the support you've shown me. Update 5. Well, my parents deleted the post since they didn't look good after the rest of my family found out about it. As I said, the rest of the family cut them off for what they did to me, so when they read it, they took my side and went after them. Some commented on the post, but others quoted it and made their own posts. I'd like to say I liked this outcome, but all I wanted was for them to stop talking about me. The good news is that at least my parents deleted the original post, and then I talked to my relatives, and they did the same with theirs. Anyway, I thank them for being on my side. It definitely meant a lot to me. Being the abandoned child creates some psychological damage, so it feels good to be loved.